Glad to see you. Good morning. I'd like to start by thanking Andy Krapenovich for hosting us today. As everybody knows, he's the Dean of Defense Planning Community, and as sound and understanding as anyone in Washington about the challenges in the current security and budget environment. So thank you, Andy, for your years of unrewarded effort. Neither he nor I nor members of this panel have easy answers. There's no easy answers to the complex set of problems faced by the Department of Defense. So I look forward to hearing the recommendations from our panel of experts as to how we might be able to further our national security interests abroad in an environment of limited resources and a changing set of international challenges. And I might add, a growing set of international challenges, a complex set of international challenges. I predict to you in the next 3 years there will be several major international crises because there's too many things happening around the world for us not to understand those challenges and also to try to be prepared to meet them. Aligning resources to our strategic priorities is incredibly difficult, and despite their flaws, our policy and political processes have demonstrated in the past great adaptability and instances of extraordinary success. These processes ushered victory in the Cold War, facilitated rebuilding of the armed forces in the post-Vietnam era, culminated in stunning military success during the Gulf War, and helped produce the adaptable and resilient military success during these times, while undertaking more than a decade of sustained combat in Afghanistan and Iraq. Today's policy debate reflects the democratized nature of national security planning and are examples of the vibrant intellectual engagement that's going on inside and outside of government. Some of the most serious risks to the institution of the Department of Defense, and by extension, our national security, are right here in government and right here in Congress. In this past year, I have explored the causes and effects of institutional mismanagement and waste on our national defense, and there's plenty of blame for everyone. First and foremost, Congress has provided the department with precious little certainty about future funding, which has caused untold amounts of scrap planning, administrative double work, and waste. My friends, there's been a change over the last 20 years, and particularly since Iraq and Afghanistan. And that is, Americans are war-weary, therefore the members of Congress are also reflect those views, and there is not the concern either for our nation's defense or for the men and women in the military, in my view, that has been historically true. Some of the most serious risks, as I said, are in government. Budget sequestration is the best example that I can give you of this, and exemplifies the surrender by Congress and the White House of its responsibility to make hard choices. Sequestration was an abrogation of our responsibility to make broad choices. That's all it was. No more, no less. And of course, we are paying a very, very heavy price for it, and will for a number of years to come. Our collective lack of courage has created budgetary instability that causes well-performing programs to be cut, employees to be furloughed, military readiness to be compromised, and strains our ability to retain the best and brightest young officers and enlisted personnel. What's more, these effects undermine attempts to properly husband taxpayer dollars and fundamentally undermines the ability of the Department of Defense to plan effectively. So it's not too much to say that in this regard, we in Congress are failing our troops and our constituents. But the Department of Defense's own struggle to efficiently and effectively manage large investments, including major weapons and IT systems, has also contributed to its current difficult position. After more than a decade of profligate spending and lax internal oversight, senior defense leaders must fundamentally change, improve how it does business. I'll spare you the litany of failed programs. I've discussed them in detail many, many times. Good example, the first trillion-dollar weapon system in history, the F-35. Maybe a great airplane, but look at the initial cost estimates and look at the cost of it today, and we still have not resolved all the problems with the F-35. Within this context, as the panelists here today explain their alternative strategic and budget choices, I ask the audience to consider in each case the likelihood that a proposed investment will successfully deliver actual capabilities to the force. If we held this exercise 10 years ago, for example, we would have agreed that the department should invest in joint and interoperable capabilities. Good idea. Communications, for example. And we might have thought it a good idea to invest billions of dollars into a program like the Joint Tactical Radio System, JTRS. And we would have been satisfied that we had satisfied a capability gap with a responsive material solution. The operational requirement and logic of it seemed sound. So, and I ask this without sarcasm, how did this all work out? And where are we today? The joint radios proved to be unreliable or too big to be useful in combat. One by one, the services dropped out of the program, and the JTRS program office shut its doors 2 years ago. A few strands of the original program remain underway with the Army. But even those elements of that program have been heavily criticized as recently as this month by the Pentagon's chief tester and the user community. My point is that the budget choices we make are only effective when programs actually deliver capabilities that the warfighter can use. Budget decisions regarding tactical aviation, shipbuilding, ground vehicle programs. Example, the USS Gerald R. Ford. We need another aircraft carrier. There's no greater supporter of aircraft carriers than John McCain. I used to fly off them. I didn't land as many times as I took off. How in the world do you justify a $2 billion cost overrun on an aircraft carrier? Do you know what the constituents in my state say that they could do with $2 billion? This is what has to be fixed. And we go at it time after time after time after time. And yes, there have been some improvements, but we've got a long, long way to go. Those of you who have heard me speak before are familiar, as I mentioned. Rather than recite this list, I will commend to you the latest annual reports of the Government Accountability Office and the Defense Department's Director of Operational Test and Evaluation. The department is also experiencing structural budgetary challenges that threaten to diminish its ability to fight and win wars. I'm speaking here of the growth in personnel and healthcare costs. When Secretary of Defense Robert Gates said in 2010, and I quote, "Healthcare costs are eating the Defense Department alive," he was criticized for alarmism. 4 years later, his assessment has proven accurate. The fact is that the Defense Department takes place in a zero-sum environment, and as the cost of personnel and benefits grow, the amounts available for training and equipping shrink, obviously. We saw the opening salvo in this debate during the unveiling of the budget agreement in December, when Senator Murray and Congressman Ryan presented a plan which slowed the growth of cost of living adjustment, COLA, for working-age military retirees. Neither the Department of Defense nor the Armed Services Committee was consulted about the proposal, and the flurry of legislative activity since its enactment is an indication of its future prospects. It's only right that the growth in military pay and retiree benefits have outpaced their civilian sector equivalents during more than a decade of war. The compensation indicators for military personnel lag for decades behind the private sector, and making up this gap has helped ensure the viability of an all-volunteer force. Our job now is to guarantee that the pay and compensation regime be made sustainable. At the current rate of growth, this is not possible. In an era of diminishing budgets, we need to find ways to reform military compensation and retirement. But going at it in the haphazard way demonstrated by our colleagues on the Budget Committee is not a recipe for success. Here's what we should do. 1, reform military compensation and retiree benefits in a comprehensive way. Grandfather current service members and military and retiree benefits. Grandfather present service member and retiree benefits. This means reforming prospectively. Make no changes until Congress receives the February 2015 report of the Military Compensation and Retirement Modernization Commission. And 4, reform the system once, rather than making small changes year after year. I'm certain that the ideas brought to the fore today will inform congressional understanding of the Department of Defense's strategic plans. I have no doubt these ideas will be held up in comparison with the 2014 Quadrennial Defense Review, which will shortly be published and reported to Congress. Andy, I thank you for all your hard work. I thank our panelists for all their hard work. We need now to understand the new challenges of the 21st century. We need to understand what it's required to fight in an asymmetrical fashion. We need to understand the new assertiveness of China and what it will require in order to make sure that we present a capability that may be a disincentive to any aggressive ideas that China may have. We have to understand that there's a Mideastern turmoil. And no, we can't fight every fight. And Americans don't want boots on the ground, nor do I. But I think when we look at the spread of al-Qaeda, when you look at Egypt today, when you look across North Africa, when you look across the Middle East, you see turmoil. You see the return of al-Qaeda. And for us to fail to inform our constituents of these threats and make a case that we need to do the proper spending and investment and strategy and policies for national defense is doing a great disservice to our constituents, because if things continue as they are, we may, I emphasize may, have to send our young people in harm's way again. And that is something all of us want to do everything we can to avoid. So I want to thank the panelists here today for their hard work. Andy, I want to thank you for your great work, and I want to thank all of you participating today. If I had a message to you, bring our discussion to our constituents throughout the country. Make them understand that we live in a world that still requires American leadership. And the only way that leadership can be effective is to discuss the nuts and bolts, bread and butter issues that are being discussed today. Thank you very much.